Alright guys, it's a teacher work day and I'm waiting for the school to open, so I figured why not do a video real quick. Let's talk about the Boston Massacre. It was on a day that's kind of like today, snowy, ice everywhere, that we have the first real act of violence during the American Revolution. So, background info. England, after the French and Indian War, taxes everywhere, tariffs, all this kind of stuff. Well, these taxes and tariffs are hitting port towns kind of hard because these tariffs are causing people to buy less, which is shutting down shipping, things like that. And it's putting a lot of dock workers out. They're not working as much because there's not as much shipping. So we have, in March 5th of 1770, we have a group of Bostonian citizens who show up at the customs house to start basically angrily yelling and protesting at the tax collector, the tariff collector. Well, these guys are all screaming and yelling, and the guy who's collecting taxes and doing his job, albeit nobody wants him to do his job, he gets nervous and calls in the British military. He calls in the Redcoats. Well, these soldiers show up and start yelling, "Get out of here, go away, move, get out, go home, quit fighting." The protest continues. People keep screaming and yelling, all this stuff. Eventually the mob starts actually throwing snowballs and chunks of ice at the soldiers. Well, these are soldiers. They've, battle hardened and trained and all that. So a snowball's not exactly a problem. But eventually these snowballs start ending up filled with rocks, and they start throwing sticks and clubs at the soldiers. The protesters even start screaming "fire and be damned," almost like egging them on to fire. They don't actually want to be shot, but they're egging them on, trying to make them chicken out and walk away. It doesn't really work though. So we got Captain Preston, who's still trying to get everybody to go away. He's still trying to get everybody to leave. Suddenly, there's a gunshot from one of the soldiers. Nobody knows if it was under command to do that or if he just took it upon himself and felt scared and fired. Well, the soldiers, the rest of them, did what they're trained to do. When you hear a gunshot, you fire as well. So you have one gunshot and then seconds later a whole barrage of gunshots. At the end of the night, the protesters have disbanded and gone home. The soldiers have gone back to their barracks and 5 Bostonians are left dead. News spreads around. This goes around Boston. It goes around the colonies as evidence that the king and them are just coming after you and trying to kill you. This comes up with a question after all of this act of shooting. Was it because the soldiers were fearful of their life, or did somebody take it upon themselves to just end the protest violently? And that question can only be answered in a court trial. But before the trial happens, Boston is flooded with information that kind of makes people a little biased. For example, one of the headlines read, "The horrid massacre in Boston perpetrated in the evening of the 5th of March 1770 by soldiers of the 29th Regiment." It's hard to stay impartial when you hear that this is a horrid massacre and perpetrated. Let's talk about massacre for a second. Massacre means a mass casualty. A large number of people died. 5 is not quite a massacre. It's bad, don't get me wrong. Don't come at me in the comments. But a massacre, it's not. Paul Revere made the matters even worse by engraving a scene of this that depicted the event of the Boston Massacre. As you can see, it's pretty one-sided. It definitely makes it look like the Redcoats were ordered to fire. So on March 13th, 1770, the soldiers were put on trial. Captain Preston is the first one to go to trial. Preston is found not guilty and acquitted on September 7th of 1770. He wasn't charged with actually shooting. He was charged with giving the order to shoot, but he was found not guilty of that, which let him off the hook as far as the firing goes. But that's not the same for the soldiers. The remaining soldiers go on trial. And out of those soldiers, 6 of them are acquitted, found not guilty. They're free to go. 2 of them are convicted of manslaughter. All right, let's take a second and talk about the difference between manslaughter and murder. Murder implies intent to kill somebody, while manslaughter has the same result as murder. So keep that in mind. So like I said, 6 of the soldiers are acquitted, 2 of them are found guilty, and those 2 that are found guilty, they push the court to try and get them out of the majority of the trouble. Montgomery and Kilroy plead the benefit of clergy as a way to reduce their sentence and not get the full punishment of it, and as a result of this, they're not charged as heavily, but they are still punished. You have Sheriff Greenleaf, the local sheriff in Boston, who brands the 2 of them on their right thumbs, which is painful, but let's be real, that's not exactly a huge punishment for murder. Come on. As you can expect, people around town are not real thrilled with this. These guys committed murder. In their eyes, they committed murder, and these two are just let off with a slap on the wrist. But let's hear from the defense attorney. The part I took in the defense of Captain Preston and the soldiers was one of the best pieces of service I ever rendered my country. As the evidence was, the verdict of the jury was exactly right. It's going to be shocking to hear that the lawyer who defended these soldiers was actually John Adams. Yeah, future second president of the United States, John Adams. But he was such a big believer in justice and the legal system that he took on this case because nobody else would. Everybody else assumed these soldiers were guilty and planned to let them all drop dead. But Adams chose to defend these soldiers because of his belief in justice. Alright, it's question of the day time. Let's stop for a second and discuss the difference between a protest and a riot. What do you guys think? Do you think that there is a difference between a protest and a riot? And if so, when does a protest go from a protest into a riot? What makes that change? Alright guys, thanks for watching Learning with Sprayberry, where we make social studies fun, easy, and educational. If you like what you saw, click like. If you want to see more videos, click subscribe. I try to drop a new video every Monday, so make sure that you hit that bell for notifications.